and welcome to Cuick Talk, the show where compliance gets decoded. Each month, we break down the CyberAB Town Hall and translate what was said, basically in the plain English, so companies in the defense industrial base can actually understand what it all means. Joining me today is Kathryn Daly. Kathryn, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Kathryn's going to be our subject matter expert who helps translate the technical side of CMMC and compliance, but she is not by herself today. Thank you so much, Ericka Todd, for joining us today.
Hi there.
Now, Ericka's got to represent the perspective of someone who is newer to the space because, fun fact, at the time of this recording, Ericka is new to the CMMC world. So let's get into it. Now, Kathryn, before we get into those real nitty-gritty details of what happened, can you just kind of give us a high-level overview? Like, what was the biggest topics covered during the February CyberAB Town Hall?
So the biggest topics that were discussed were significant changes to assessed systems and what constitutes a significant change. So there was an alignment within DFARS and a class deviation issued. The growth of the CMMC ecosystem, every CMMC town hall, they touch on how the ecosystem has grown and how many assessors, CCPs, etc., have entered the ecosystem, as well as how many assessments have been completed to kind of give the DIB an idea of what that ecosystem looks like today. They talked about mock or practice assessments and what is all entailed in a mock assessment. And then also the big update with the certification exams moving over to ISACA and what all is involved with that transition.
So, Kathryn, you just did a whole laundry list of items here. But for someone who actually didn't watch the town hall, what are maybe 2 or 3 things they should really know about?
So I think significant changes is a big topic to understand because every year you have to attest to your security posture and you have to attest to your assessment scope remaining the same. The growth of the CMMC ecosystem that they touch on every month is really important because it affects how quickly you can get assessed. A lot of people right now are hedging bets and not getting assessed right away and not realizing the bottleneck that's being created with as many OSCs that are out there that need to be assessed versus how many assessors there are actually to do it. Transitioning to the certification exams to ISACA is a really big change because there is now going to be continuous education requirements that didn't previously exist.
So, Kathryn, you were getting into how we're getting more companies wanting to get certified before we even have assessors to certify them. So it's no secret that this whole ecosystem is just growing. And they actually talked about that during the town hall. Can you give us a few of those highlights?
Yeah, so right now, from an assessment standpoint, there has been 896 level 2 certifications issued to the DIB. 110 assessments are currently in progress. There are right now 98 authorized C3 PAOs. So those are the companies that employ either W-2 or 1099 assessors. Of those 98 C3 PAOs, there are 748 certified assessors. So when you look at an assessment team, you have to have an LCCA and then you have to have another CCA on the team. So just because there's 748 CCAs does not mean that each one can do their own assessment. Multiple CCAs are needed on an assessment team. There's also 1,494 CCPs currently.
Yes, the ecosystem's currently growing. More people want to be assessed than ever, and we just don't have enough assessors. So, Kathryn, I know you've personally dealt with this. That wait list to get assessed is just growing and growing and growing. But, Ericka, I know we've kind of left you there in the corner for a bit, and I really want to bring you in this conversation. So, Ericka, you listened to the town hall with us. Can you tell us what stood out to you?
Mostly just the numbers, because just on what I have been working with, I have seen how much of like a wait list has been affecting different companies as far as like wanting to get these assessments done, because everyone has this looming date about November. All I hear about mostly is November, November, November. And so what I'm kind of interested in is if you take all of these numbers, like respectively, like only having, you know, that amount of assessors, and then you're going to need multiple assessors on an assessment team. Then you need an LCC, which I'll be honest, I don't even know what that is. So I know about your assessment. I didn't realize that it required that many people to just do one assessment. So it seems like there's just a lot of moving parts that I wasn't completely aware of.
Yeah, the assessment team has multiple CCAs and generally some CCPs also supporting it. There's going to be a lead CCA. There's going to be another assessor on the team. There's also someone for QA. So once the assessors go through the assessment and compile all of the evidence, then it's sent to the QA person who verifies that the assessor did their job correctly. And once it's done with QA, then they will issue the certificate. So there are several people on the assessment team. It's just not just one assessor. So I know it seems like we don't have a lot of CCAs right now for the number of OSAs that are out there, but we are actually ahead of schedule on what they anticipated.
So, Kathryn, I want to change gears here a little bit. I have been in countless meetings, sitting in the boardroom, arguing over what significant changes are, what the term means, and they finally decided to cover this in the last town hall. Kathryn, can you dive a little deeper into this?
When you get assessed, you are you have an assessment scope that is defined, and that is what is assessed. So if you make a significant change and significant change is defined. I know a lot of people are saying that it's not defined, but it is defined in the scoping guide. What it could be a significant architectural change or a boundary change, expansion or merger or expansion of network or mergers and acquisitions. So when you're within Cuick Track, you don't really have the opportunity to have significant changes because we manage the network. We manage the entire boundary. However, if you were a Cuick Track client, let's say, and you now you are receiving paper CUI. So when you got assessed, you were digital only, and all of your CUI was within Cuick Track. Well, when you start receiving paper CUI, that is a major expansion of scope because now your physical building is in scope and it wasn't assessed during your third-party assessment. So that would trigger a new assessment. Other examples of what would trigger a new assessment is if you had a change in cloud service provider that was providing security mechanisms that you're inheriting. So when our Cuick Track clients are assessed, 82% or so of the controls are inherited by Cuick Track. Let's say that our client decided to go with another cloud service provider. Well, that's 82% of the controls that you inherited for that assessment that you're no longer inheriting. There's the new CSP that you move to, they are definitely going to be implementing controls differently than we implement them here. So that would definitely trigger a new assessment.
So basically, in other words, since the certification is based on what was assessed, if your environment changes too much, you're going to have to do another assessment.
Absolutely. Small changes, for example, you are tracking your, your authorized users with one tracking mechanism and you make a change to the way you're tracking it. That's a documentation update. That's really just captured in continuous monitoring because it doesn't really change the implementation of the control. However, if you went to a completely different tool to be tracking and creating user accounts, then that would constitute a major change.
I do have a question. So we were talking, you did mention, like, I know going to physical CUI, especially whenever you're dealing with an actual environment, that's quite a big leap. What if you did keep your cloud environment, but later on, after your assessment, you decided to do physical CUI? Would that go ahead and prompt a whole new assessment? Or is there like addition clause that maybe they can just have that assessed? Or how does that kind of look?
That would be up to the assessor.
Okay.
You could possibly use the same assessor that you used for your initial assessment and see if they will assess the delta of the controls that would change. It really just depends on what the change is to the scope and what that assessor feels comfortable with.
So I want to bring up the DFARS updates because that really was the biggest technical discussion in town hall. And I got to be honest, my brain just checked out during the DFARS updates. That was way too technical for me. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. And Kathryn, would you be able to just kind of simplify this at the highest level? What were they talking about?
So initially, there was a requirement to enter a score in SPRS, and that score could be anywhere from -203 to 110. -203, you are not compliant with anything, and 110, you're compliant with everything. So the initial requirement was that you had to enter a numerical score into SPRS. The biggest change in this whole realignment is that that score is no longer required because in November, we got the capability to do the self-assessment, which kind of made the numerical score OBE. It also gave people the idea that they could just, throw something in there. And it didn't matter what that number was as long as it was defendable. But now with the self-assessment after CMMC went into effect in November of last year, now you have to actually do a self-assessment. You can't just put whatever number you're compliant with because you have to do a self-assessment on met, not met for every single control in SPRS now, and you have to if it's not a POAMable control, then you will not get a status if you mark it as not met. So you have to be compliant with the majority of the controls. There are very few, especially for our Cuick Track clients that inherit 82% of them. There's very few that are non-POAMable. So that kind of sets the bar a little bit higher.
I did have a clarifying question. So you're saying that, yes, the SPRS score isn't what they're kind of grading off of now as just like that first initial step. But however, if you are a subcontractor and say that your bigger contractor is still asking you to submit a SPRS score, is that still something that you kind of have to keep in mind to have something to deliver with like your business partners?
So as of now, right, the SPRS score is still in SPRS, and contractors are not beholden by the DFARS requirements. So your primes can request whatever they want to. So if your prime is still requesting an SPRS score be entered, you still have to enter the SPRS score for your prime. However, the government is no longer requiring it.
So let's move on to something that everyone loves doing, and I'm talking about mock assessments. And Kathryn, I know you have gone through many mock assessments, and it does kind of sound self-explanatory, but there is actually more that goes into it. So for those of us who are new to this world, can you kind of explain what a mock assessment entails?
Yeah, sure. So a mock assessment is basically a practice or like a scrimmage. The assessor should be using the assessment guide. They should be using the same level of rigor that they would in a real assessment. However, the results are used to strengthen your program and to fill in any gaps that you didn't previously identify before you enter the actual assessment.
Ericka and Kathryn, I want to say thank you so much for joining us today. It has been an honor having you two as guests. And for everyone else out there, thank you so much for helping us decode compliance with another episode of Cuick Talk. Until next time, stay curious, stay compliant. Goodbye, everyone.
Cuick Talk, where gets decoded.